Okay, hello everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. We're going to go ahead and get started. I think maybe a few others will join us as we do. Before I sort of introduce who I am and the others on the call and get us going, I just wanted to see Jessica or Sean or anybody else if there are some reminders that you wanted to give to folks about questions or any other logistics before I jump into the presentation.
This is Sean Bath. You should have a control panel of some form and a question bar somewhere. Feel free to submit any questions as we go through, and just don't even wait on it. Just go ahead and put your question in, and we might stop at a transition point in order to address the question. I think that's it for now.
Okay, great. Thank you. So just as a hopefully a reminder to folks, you are in our first informational webinar of 2 that we will host over the next couple of months for the Climate Adaptation Partnerships CAP, otherwise known as CAP, Notice of Federal Funding Opportunity for FY24. For those that might be a bit newer to this program or haven't heard of this program before, our name used to be RISA, Regional Integrated Sciences and Assessments Program, and was that name for many years. So if you have heard of RISA, we have changed our name to Climate Adaptation Partnerships, but we are one and the same program. My name is Chelsea Combest Friedman. I'm the director for the CAP program, and if you see the names on the bottom of this slide, that is our CAP team at NOAA that helps manage both the CAP program and the network of teams that we have across the country that are funded by CAP. So on the call with us today, we also have Federal Program Manager Sean Bath. We have a couple program specialists from the team, Jeannie Bay and Jessica Garrison. So all here to help answer questions and provide some more information about this NOFO as we go along. We can move to the next slide, please, Jessica. So a few things we wanted to accomplish on the webinar today. First, we wanted to give you just a quick intro to the CAP program, especially for anybody who might be a bit less familiar with our program. Then we're going to go into some more details about the competitions that are in the NOFO. And finally, we'll provide some information that hopefully will be helpful to you as you develop your letters of intent and full proposals. And as I said, there will be a second webinar coming up, which will give you some more details about at the end of this particular call today, and that will go through even more details, kind of more for the proposal stage. All right, next slide. And actually, we can just go right into the next one. Okay. So Climate Adaptation Partnerships is part of the Climate Program Office at NOAA, and we are in a division called Climate and Societal Interactions. So we're very much a program that is somewhat unique in the agency that focuses on the intersection between climate and people. Much of the kind of entry points for climate programs really across the government, but certainly across NOAA, tend to be around sort of physical climate related hazards. So things like extreme events or drought or heat, maybe wildfire. CAP really starts with the social context, with people and their interests, and brings climate in from there. So our mission is to advance equitable adaptation through sustained regional research and community engagement. This is a program that taps into regional and local preferences and sort of the realities of a region, and then works with communities and decision makers to co-develop or to inform solutions to those issues that matter most to the people of that place. Structurally, This is a program that primarily, although not exclusively, funds team awards, which is what these two competitions are about. So these are 5-year cooperative agreements, which is a kind of grant that allows for a lot more collaboration between a federal agency, in this case NOAA, and the grantees. So it's we as program staff in particular have a lot more interaction with our grantees than a normal grant would allow for. And the cooperative agreements are made between NOAA and a team that is made up of usually a mix of researchers and kind of a whole host of different sorts of specialists, adaptation practitioners, communication specialists, outreach specialists, in some cases extension folks that cover or that come from a number of different organizations, governments, universities across usually multiple states or territories. So our regions in most cases tend to be across multiple states and territories. The general, on your right-hand side, you're looking at this ring diagram. This is a graphic that came out of some work we did as a program to develop a program theory, and that information is available, at least some parts of that information are available online, so you can learn a little bit more about our program theory, and that might be helpful to you if you're getting a sense of our program. But this was a graphic that we sort of pulled out of that work. And while the teams across the nation really work on unique sets of topics and are made up of unique sets of partners because they are very much flavored by the region that they're in, there tends to be an approach that we see that's similar to the way they work across the country. And that's what this ring diagram is hopefully helping to illuminate. So this is what we sort of generally refer to as collaborative research. And it includes establishing trust between partners, collaborative research where the needs are very much defined by the community, and I use community really broadly, could be community of decision makers, could be geographic community, where the research that's being done is designed to meet those needs that are being defined by the community, and communities actually participate as equal knowledge holders. The benefits are then received by and useful to the community, and we have learned, at least we feel we've learned, that this allows for better decisions and increased capacity and hopefully at the end of the day, development of place-based climate solutions. Next slide, please. This is a map of where we currently have both full CAP teams and then, and so the full CAP teams are demarcated by the darker colors. There currently are 13 CAP teams across the US. And then the shaded areas are where we have, those are our priority expansion geographies, and you'll see that both the Northeast and the Southeast are included in that shaded area. And the expansion geographies are where we have been working to seed some activities through collaborative planning grants, and you'll hear a little bit more about those later in the webinar, and build some relationships and some networks and kind of bring a little bit of CAP, the CAP approach to these geographies as we work towards expanding our program to full national coverage. Up until now, we have, well, even now, we have not had the resources to have full teams in all of the states and territories in the US, but that is something that we are actively working toward. Next slide, please. This is a pretty old program, I suppose, by federal standards at least. It started back in the mid-90s, so there's been a lot of evolution of the program and of the climate adaptation field in the US over that time period. I won't go into too much depth here, but wanted to point to a couple of things in the sort of time period closer to where we are now, and that is that over this evolution, we have increased our focus on complex compound hazards or risks. So we talked a little bit about that earlier, where a lot of climate programs might be a little bit more singularly focused on a physical climate hazard, and CAP thinks very much about really the intersection of not just physical hazards, but also social vulnerabilities and stressors that are part of the contextualization that's needed to actually advance climate adaptation. And then we've also put an increasing emphasis on both working with and in frontline communities and thinking about equity really in all aspects of the work that we do. Next slide, please. Okay, we wanted to point you to sort of a few program focus areas that might be relevant to be thinking about as you're looking at this NOFO and these competitions. The first is that teams sort of by nature and by necessity have to be regionally strategic, and we encourage iteration. And part of that, as I said, is sort of what resources are available, and so the need to really think carefully about partnerships and opportunities for leveraging. And then part of it is that we found it to be more successful, that there is some built-in flexibility to ensure that the projects that are developed really are collaborative and deeply engage the community and decision-making partners with whom they're working, and that they're also able to respond to emerging needs as those change over the course of 5 years in a region. We have also been pushing a little bit more towards ensuring that we're identifying the issues and needs of communities that maybe have not received a lot of attention either by NOAA or by other federal agencies, or don't kind of currently have partners in the federal space with whom they're working on climate adaptation work. So we're trying to ensure that as federal dollars, right, these are getting out to those communities that need it. The second is innovations in equity and justice. This is something that we really started pushing very hard on at the end of the Trump administration in our calls for proposals, otherwise called NOFO for us. This involves a whole host of things that Jeannie's going to talk about a little bit more in depth in a few minutes, so I won't go into detail here, but we're really thinking about how the agendas for the proposals or the scopes of work for the proposals, get formulated with partners that go beyond academic institutions, how those projects are, how they ensure that there's an equitable management and design, and thinking through what kinds of approaches, and sometimes the CAP network is actually creating new approaches here, what kinds of approaches we have to really seriously identify vulnerable communities, and then the engagement techniques and methods that are required to work with, especially frontline communities, and how those might be different from some of the engagement techniques and methods we use in maybe more established decision-making communities. The third, groundbreaking questions of adaptation and adaptive futures. A lot of the network is focused, so a lot of these team proposals are focused on activities and projects where there's support, the information is supporting sort of current decision-making needs, but there's also an element of this program and an element usually we see in the proposals where there's thought given to sort of how do we push the field forward? What are the kinds of questions decision makers are going to be asking, in 20 years from now or 10 years from now, or they're starting to ask, but they're not quite sure, how to ask. And so thinking about things like how we are considering low carbon development, with adaptation, or opportunities to dig deeper on fiscal policy and incentives, financial incentives for adaptation, just to provide a couple of examples. There are many. And the last one sort of fits into that bucket in a way as well. We have been increasingly thinking about how transformational adaptation as a concept fits into our work, and how we support both work that's leading, because realistically this is where we are in many places, how we support work that leads to both incremental changes, but how do we sort of push toward more transformational adaptation outcomes at the same time. And I will stop there because we've given you a lot of information about the CAP program generally, and just see if there are any questions we can take about the program itself at this stage before I hand it over to Jeannie to talk a little bit more about the NOFO and competitions. So Jessica, do we have questions?
I do not have any at the moment.
Okay, great. Well, again, feel free to put questions in for us as we go along, and we can always pause to address those if we need to before we get to the next sections. But if there aren't any questions right now, given the time, I think I will just hand things right over to Jeannie and we will continue.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chelsea. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeannie Bay, and I'll be providing the beginning of our overview of the funding opportunity. Next slide, please. So the main purpose of this funding opportunity is to fund the formation of a transdisciplinary team to carry out planned research and engagement activities in each of the 2 eligible regions. And there will be up to 1 award made per region. Proposals should focus on multiple societal issues that are relevant to climate adaptation in the applicable region and develop a set of interconnected projects related to these issues. Teams should aim to balance diverse approaches to scientific inquiry with community engagement and participation, and proposals should also emphasize the benefits of the proposed work to frontline communities. Topical areas of focus for a CAP team should be guided by a collaborative and iterative assessment of opportunities and needs driven by dialogue between CAP team members and regional partners, and should also reflect the current program objectives that are described in section 1A of the NOFO. So be sure to pay close attention to the details of that section when reading through the solicitation. Next slide, please. So proposals can request up to $1,100,000 per year for core CAP work for a total of $5,500,000 over a 5-year period. And a minimum of $200,000 within that total budget must be set aside to directly fund community-based organizations or local governments serving under-resourced frontline communities. And again, it is anticipated that a maximum of 1 CAP team will be funded per region, depending on funding availability. Next slide, please. So both of the regions we are soliciting applications for under this NOFO are regions where we have never had CAP teams before. So the first new region we are soliciting applications for is the Upper Northeast, which includes the states of Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, as well as Western Massachusetts and upstate New York. Next slide, please. And the second new region we are soliciting applications for is the Southeast, which includes Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and Florida. Next slide, please. So the goal of this work is to foster on-the-ground climate adaptation expertise and build capacity and trust between project partners and the communities that they aim to serve within the specified region. And the regions listed on the previous slides and their states are priorities and guidelines for coverage, meaning that applicants are permitted to go beyond the borders of the states listed within a region only if there is a strong justification for determining alternative boundaries. Proposals should cover a significant portion of general regional geographies and should strive for geographic balance across the region in terms of research expertise, community partners, project focus, and engagement activities. And additionally, proposals must balance issues for both inland and coastal areas. So the FY2024 CAP NOFO information sheet that we developed to support the NOFO has a lot more information about determining geographic coverage, so please be sure to read through that section carefully. And then lastly, as Chelsea mentioned earlier, collaborative planning activities have been funded in each of these regions, and they consisted of short-term projects that aimed to build key relationships across jurisdictional and institutional networks to help lay the groundwork for potential investment in full CAP teams. And excuse me, the outcomes from this work will be highly informative for the creation of new teams in these regions. And we have linked to the webpage that covers our expansion activities in this slide, which will be an important page to review. And one note here is that our overall Climate Program Office website just went through a transition to a new platform. And so we are still in the process of posting the white papers that were developed by the planning activity PIs, but those should be available hopefully by the end of today, if not the end of the week. Next slide, please. Applicants should take into account the following 5 justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, or JEDI considerations when crafting their proposals. So firstly, the vulnerability and disproportionate impacts of climate change on frontline communities, including economically disadvantaged, historically marginalized communities, indigenous and tribal communities, and rural communities, as well as communities, towns, or neighborhoods that are under-resourced and underserved by technical, financial, and/or human resources to address climate risks and vulnerabilities. The third consideration is the role that researchers and practitioners play in carrying out work in ways that acknowledge existing legacies of social and environmental inequities and injustices, and supporting actions that address them. The fourth consideration is the representation of regional diversity in team structures, roles and responsibilities, team decision-making approaches, advisory board composition, institutional roles, and broader networks and partnerships. And then lastly, team contributions to a diverse next generation climate adaptation workforce. So applicants are required to submit a statement on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, which will summarize the role that the research team will play and the proposed activities in promoting JEDI in order to maximize transparency, accountability, and follow through with collaborators and research participants. And it's important that these mechanisms are woven into the body of the proposal, but this JEDI statement will allow the reviewers to see how they interact with each other to form or not form a cohesive model for JEDI that the proposal is taking. So overall, these criteria take a broader look at science that considers historical inequities, current vulnerabilities and inequality, as well as opportunities for justice, such as evening the playing field or increasing access to information and science and the opportunity for change, power dynamics through methodologies and scientific team members, and pays attention to future opportunities and trajectories for achieving justice and equity through diversity and inclusion. And with that, I will hand it off to Sean to talk more about the strong cap proposals.
Great, thanks, Jeannie. So this is Sean again. I'm going to finish up this section by reviewing what makes a strong cap proposal and what are some of the topics that are duplicative with other NOAA-funded programs. So strong proposals should balance scientific inquiry with engagement processes, provide actionable scientific information on climate variability and change at the scale decision makers and communities need for short and long-term planning, apply knowledge to action, providing high priority climate research services and practices to serve respective regions and the nation, use a transdisciplinary science approach, which it does include and probably has some strong center of social science from leadership through project design and implementation, prioritizes local expertise, institutions, and community partnerships across the region, addresses issues of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion throughout the proposed work, as Jeannie just mentioned at length, includes strong program management and interaction and integration across the team. We have some resources that focuses specifically on what that looks like. And then lastly, evaluate progress of project outputs and regional adaptation outcomes. This is usually a function that's built into the work and planned for over the course of the 5 years. Next slide. So now we'll consider a few topics we don't significantly fund due to there being dedicated funding sources elsewhere in NOAA. So this is not really a comprehensive list, but it includes some of the more common topics we see, especially given the traditional capacities of climate science. So the provision of physical science information is really the majority of what NOAA provides to the public. We want to maintain a relative advantage in the climate services umbrella as a unique blend of science and engagement capacities focused on complex compound events, as we mentioned, a lot of integration of physical and social, and a lot of focus on engagement with communities and sort of a co-production of information. That being a unique aspect of what we have, some of the more traditional funding sources that are out there or work of climate science has other programs within NOAA that are dedicated to it and are frankly usually much larger than just we are. So we don't want this to be perceived as a funding opportunity that sort of like addresses that at a regional level or sort of uses this in order to build an aspect of these other systems. And the first one is general foundational physical science, which really is funded by our colleagues in the Earth System Science and Modeling Division at the Climate Program Office. But this includes climate modeling, downscaling, and projections as well. Unless, and this is a really important asterisk, and unique regional need can be demonstrated effectively. Honestly, this is something that we've actually seen quite frequently when it comes to a lot of downscaling and projections. There has been a lot of need to demonstrate it at the regional level, but it continues to be an evolving issue where there's a lot of discussion going on nationally about how to handle regional climate modeling. So being sort of both tied to, if you're going to go for that angle, you need to make sure that it's not too overwhelming in the proposal and that it has a strong justification to actual need on the ground. Improvements in forecasting and forecast systems, that's really something that is funded really by like the Weather Program Office and probably other parts of NOAA. It's also a little bit more short term than we're typically focused on. So we're not looking for that. Integrated information systems and observation systems are something that we have several of at NOAA, including chiefly in the Climate Program Office. We have ones focused on drought and heat health. There's one on floods developing, and there are like ocean observation systems, et cetera. Again, that's something that could be a partner in all of this, but we're not looking for like a significant chunk of the team to be sort of focused on a national system that is developing out. Even when the system has sort of like a regional interface or a regional collection of needs. We really want our teams to be flexible over the 5 years in handling the partnerships directly and developing and responding to the needs that they hear on the ground. And then lastly, something that we're hearing much more commonly, so this isn't necessarily traditional climate science, but we are getting a lot of inquiries about innovation of commercial technology for adaptation. And often these are commercial entities themselves that are coming to us. So just as an FYI, we're not really primarily set up to do that sort of innovation of technology, but there is a small business innovation research program in NOAA that could take those sorts of requests. So look out for the SBIR program if that's sort of what you have. And again, like that aspect could be built into a larger CAP proposal, but it would need to follow all of this other guidance that we're seeing, and it would need to have this sort of balance of the proposal that we're aiming for in order to really be relevant and also competitive. Next slide. Okay, so now I'll talk a little bit about some of the details, especially in the letter of intent phase, since that's coming up, but also a little bit of sneak peek at what to look for in the proposals. Next slide. So again, the LOIs, they should be submitted by October 30th. That's by email. What letters of intent are really your opportunity to summarize your ideas for the full proposal and to receive feedback from us, especially on the relevance of what you're proposing to the target competition. So we don't review for sort of like technical merit. That will be something that a peer review panel does later, and it's not something that, even if we gave you our opinions about the technical side of things, ultimately it's going to be that peer review panel that determines things. So the LOIs are due October 30th. That is via email on our general email address, oar.cpo.reset@noaa.gov, which is listed elsewhere in this presentation. So please remember to note the competition number in the email title. Given the tight timeline, we want to emphasize that these LOIs are just an opportunity, so they're not required. We do encourage them because it's a very good opportunity to give feedback. So even if you sort of have like a not fully fleshed out idea or not a full set of partners, or the partners might change, please do consider submitting an LOI. And also we can talk to you through the office hours that we have scheduled as well, but the LOI will be much more concrete for us. The LOIs should be 2 pages, and if completing an LOI is not realistic, then attending our office hours is an alternative. But again, it's something concrete that we can actually work with. So please emphasize the LOI. Full proposals are then later due February 5th. And we'll have a second webinar before we get there to talk about some of the concrete details of that. Next slide. So, oh, I see, I was skipping a little bit ahead. So this is, I actually spoke to this a little bit already. Let's see if there's anything didn't cover. This fourth bullet here, a focus on the section 4B of the NOFO. This is a good reminder because this section is sort of in the hierarchy of details. The notice of funding opportunity is the most important of all of the information that we're giving you. That is the sort of like legally binding aspect of the competition. You'll want to look at that section 4B and review everything that's there and understand what the program priorities are. And you'll really want the LOI and the overall proposal to be very responsive to that set of priorities. So I will drop the office hours link in the chat here. And please sign up at your convenience. We have a few dates in October, but then we also have a little bit of a gap after the LOIs come in on October 30th, and we have a few more slots in late November and December. We can add more as we go. Responses will be provided generally 4 weeks after the LOI due date. I'll be honest, we're probably going to try to get that in way earlier than that, but that's our sort of full window that you can potentially expect. Next slide. So in terms of the full proposal and submitting it, there are a few accounts that you need to pay attention to and make sure that you're registered, your institution is registered and sort of prepared for this. I would not wait to go through the list of platforms that you need to be prepared for. Make sure that you read all the guidance for this that's sort of like listed in the NOFO specifically, because that'll be the most up-to-date guidance. But really what's a little bit tricky about this situation that you should be aware of is that we are switching our grants database. It is currently in transition at NOAA for the remainder of October. And that's basically, we were using Grants Online and we're transitioning to a system called ERA that is used by the National Institute of Health. Basically, the system ERA is online. You could potentially go on there because it's used by NIH, but there is no NOAA information actually integrated into it. So you won't see anything until the end of the month. But basically, you can start the registration process. So this link to the ERA Commons page has a lot of background information on the transition that's happening. I would review this and just make sure that you follow the trainings, and especially your like institute sponsored office and people like that. Make sure that they go through that training and register in advance so that there isn't any trouble with the system when you really need to get the proposal in February. So all applicants must have a DUNS number. I actually think that might be a little bit out of date as well, because I think that they're using SAM numbers now, and I'm not sure if that's the same thing or a different thing. So just honestly make sure to go to that ERA Commons website and make sure that everything there you're complying with. So for our side, this is a little bit of a sneak peek now because we'll go in more detail on this in the second webinar, but the components that are listed on page 15, full list on page 16 of the NOFO, these is sort of like all of the individual elements that you'll need to pull together for the NOFO, the full NOFO itself. I think it's a good idea probably to just review that even as you're putting the LOI together, to understand, for example, that you'll have to think about the JEDI statement, for example, that Jeannie spoke to at length, but also we have a project management plan where you'll describe what the team management will look like, considering these are large awards and they're there for 5 years and we're very collaborative with them. We have certain expectations about what the team management looks like, and you'll have to sort of put that together, and that'll be a big part of the proposal, which is different than a lot of grants out there. Like, we're not just evaluating on the basis of what, ideas or research questions that you pitch. That is part of it. You'll have a portfolio of projects, but then you'll also have the core program management that will evaluate. Next slide. So as I've been referencing, the second webinar, that'll happen Thursday, November 30th. The registration link is already available on our website, and it'll be after we've had a chance to digest LOIs. Next slide. So this is a compilation of some of our most important guidance. It's in an email that we've been sending out, but I'm not sure that everyone has gotten a chance to see that email. All of this is on the main page, which is cpo.noaa.gov/grants. If you go to that page, you will be able to find our second or our notice of funding opportunity listed as the second item. Then once you go onto that page, basically all of this information is there. It just might be under individual like accordion menus and links. So in a moment, I'm going to go through that with all of you and show you where these individual pieces are. But just to describe what these items are, the main one is the funding opportunity page. That's what I'm talking about here, that has all this other information. It also links to the Grants.gov listing, which is where you can actually submit the proposal when you're ready. And it has at least the core NOFO on that Grants.gov page, but we can put a lot of supplementary material on that funding opportunity page that you'll see. The full NOFO is again, the legal document that you'll want to respond to here. That is the highest in the hierarchy of information that we're providing for you. So anything that is stated in there is sort of the most definitive. The information sheet is built as a companion piece to that NOFO. So it just goes on in a little bit more detail, for example, about what the geographic scope should be and how you can show geographic balance across multiple states, and some other common issues that are really in every one of our competitions. But we do get, there are a lot of things that we realize we haven't answered, or a lot of things that we assume you know what we're talking about, and actually this is very new to you. So we get a lot of questions, and we put those questions on our FAQ, which are on the website. We actually do update that FAQ over the course of the competition with answers to the questions that we're receiving, so everyone can benefit from the information that we're sort of giving people in reply. So once I show you where that link is, make sure that you keep checking that FAQ page if you have common questions before you sort of come to us with them. And then this common characteristics of successful CAPRISA teams. This is a web page on our larger website which reviews a little sneak preview of our total program theory, and a little bit of the building blocks of what is expected in CAPRISA teams. So you'll see a logic model on that website, which will show sort of some of the main primary functions and primary outcomes that we drive towards with CAPRISA teams. And you'll also see sort of like, we have teams, we typically expect there to be a full-time program manager, for example, a program manager or coordinator, in addition to the lead PI, that can sort of herd the cats of the larger academic team or practitioner team that is working on this overall thing, that they can be the point of contact for us. So there are some things about that are really put together in that web page. And then lastly, I'm not sure if this is ready yet. We'll see in a moment on the website, but we have put together a guide to the existing teams. So if you have if you want to see what this looks like in actual detail, the guide basically has a little bit of who's involved with each team, what institutions are they, and what regions, and a little bit about from their abstract and their proposals, where they break down either the overall topics that they're going for, or the a set of projects that they have organized themselves with. It's not meant to be, it's not necessarily accurate information, but it's because it's been a couple of years for some of the existing teams, but it is what they put in their proposals. So it's something that, you know, you can sort of look at and build your own version of that, especially seeing the diversity across all the regions, because there often is a reason to have some diversity and different regional-based approaches to this. So I'm going to take over the presenter mode now in order to share the web page. Bear with me one moment. Okay. I assume this is showing correctly. Okay, so thank you. So here's our website. This is where you can go to if you do cpo.noaa.gov/grants, which redirects to funding opportunities. You'll see the list here, and you can go and click on our funding opportunity, and then you'll get to our, once it loads. Of course, it takes a little bit at the moment while I'm live. Okay, so then you'll get to our page. Right at the top, we have a banner with important information. So here are the 2 webinars. We'll post the recording when we get the chance of each of these webinars so that everyone can partake in the information. As you scroll down, you have some of the important details, the funding opportunity number and such. But then everything else is sort of organized either in these individual sections at NOFO at a glance, or the list of competitions here, which it's a bit funky, but basically the 2 regions are in listed under 2 competitions, but basically this is kind of one big competition in a sense. So, and then the FAQ link is right here. So just to look in each of these pages, this is kind of a repeat of the text that's in the NOFO in terms of introducing our program and the competition. There are some of the additional links here, the common characteristics of a successful team. So just to peek on that page for just a second to show you what this looks like. Here's the logic model that's from our program theory. It's very high level, but it's focused on teams and what the teams do. There's a little bit of text that explains what this logic model does. And then there's this section about the building blocks of a team structure, focused on what the leadership looks like, how the leadership needs to be sort of balanced between social and physical expertise, needs to have engagement with high-level decision makers, et cetera, et cetera. Program management, this is the dedicated program manager or coordinator I was talking about. That is a very common element in all teams, and it's very helpful if you budget for that, sort of going right into everything. Typically, teams have advisory committees, and they, you know, put a lot of have to put the right people in there who have broad perspectives on the region, but also are sort of embedded in decision-making roles. That's usually very good. Or partner organizations that are very similar. A bit more about the research and engagement balance and how that's sort of managed across the teams. Students and young professionals, which play in a lot. The evaluation piece, outreach, communication, and translation. And for some reason, advisory is repeating. Again, our website just went through a transition, so you might notice little quirks. Yeah, so this will be super helpful for you if you've never done one of our proposals before. You can sort of go through this and think about what your own version would be. Again, office hours are posted here. You can, it'll open up a calendar, which you can find a slot and then book that slot. Feel free to book them in advance if you're sure that you're gonna want to have questions with us at a certain time. All right, and then the next section here. Whoa, okay. So a link to the NOFO, that'll be the actual document itself, and then the Grants.gov listing and application. Important dates. Here again are the important dates. If ever they should change, we will change them directly on the website, so you can sort of check here. It's dynamic. And let's see where we have some information we want to go through. Okay. The rest of the information, just to show you the FAQ, it redirects to this page, which has some questions and answers on it that actually, in some cases, are unique from the rest of the information we have available, and that'll be updated on a regular basis. And then lastly, the list of competitions, which really it's it's the same information for both of them. So this information sheet is attached, but it is the same for both competitions. So this information sheet goes in more detail into some of the main values of the program that are mentioned in the NOFO. Again, repeats the financial information, and then has a long discussion section on determining geographic scope. So especially if you're having trouble with this, this will really be helpful. We have our map. Other issues addressed are developing partnerships and sort of what that looks like. One thing that this meant that I can mention very briefly on this is that, you know, you might be forming, you might have a basis of relationships to lean on, or you might be forming new relationships, and that's fine. We don't want you to push early relationships and make it seem like, you know, it's an established relationship. If it's entirely okay if you don't already have the relationships at hand. Part of the proposal process can be about starting that, and then we can expect in the first few years of the agreement that you have a process for building those relationships. That is what we'll be looking for when we're reviewing the proposal itself. And we have a little bit of our perspective on what the value and importance of the teams are and how they work as a network. And then there is some focused advice on the proposal preparation itself or writing, the teams and partners, letters of support, the new required frontline community investments, and links back to the website we were just looking at. So if you have any questions whatsoever in any of this material as we go on, you can either send emails to oar.cpo.risa@noaa.gov. You can set up office hours, you can do both of these things, and we'll be on the lookout for all of that information. So Jessica, take it back for, I think the last slide is just, yes.
Actually, do you mind showing the expansion activities page before
Oh,
you?
sure.
Yeah, I think that we have a question that might relate to that, so that might be a good one to quickly show.
Let's see, it's not directly linked. This is our general page, by the way. There's a menu on the left, and you can find expansion activities listed under teams and expansion. Okay. Do you want to look at the?
So we have a question. I can go ahead and read it. I'm curious if we can get a little more detail on the team building process to then apply for a full cap. Is the timeline for those types of proposals the same, and what is the scope? So I'm guessing that this question relates to the collaborative planning activities that we were talking about. And there's more information really on our expansion, like our approach to expanding into new geographies on this page that Sean's on right now. It was a multi-pronged approach, and the collaborative planning activity grants were one aspect of that overall approach of helping to build some, you know, a little bit of capacity in these geographies, hopefully in advance of having the funding for a full team. The collaborative planning grants themselves, if that is what this question is asking about, that was a competition that we ran previously, so it's not available for this year. But I do want to clarify that that the full team proposals that are part of this NOFO, they can come in from individuals and partners that were, you know, that were outside of those collaborative planning grants. So in other words, you don't need to have had to have been a PI on one of those grants to apply for this. In terms of sort of where we saw the collaborative planning grants supporting both future teams and the region themselves in an uncertain funding environment, what our hope was is that the results of those grants, those collaborative planning grants, which include white papers and some videos and some other things, right, that those could be useful to the region in terms of understanding the needs that are bubbling up at the community level, in terms of building new networks across areas that might otherwise be siloed, or across states that might otherwise not be working together on climate adaptation. And so there could be a number of advantages and positive outcomes from that work, regardless of whether we got the funding for a future team. But that also it would hopefully support building those kinds of networks that would be useful if as we have right now, we have this kind of NOFO for the team awards. So all to say that this is a very open competition for any partners in the regions at this stage. I hope that answered the question. I'm not sure if that was exactly what you were going for there, but I'm guessing that's what you meant with team building process. Thanks, Sean.
Well, thank you. And I think we can go ahead and go into questions. And if there's any aspect to that was not answered, please do speak up through another question.
At the moment, that was our only question. So if anyone has anyone else, feel free to send it in.
Why don't we hang out for another couple of minutes, and then if we don't receive any other questions, we can end a little early. Okay, I don't think we have any other questions coming in. So just a thank you again to those who joined us and for your interest in the program. And we will have this webinar recording up for anybody who missed it. Thanks so much.